Figured we'd start with that, being three guys from Canada here, united by the orange coin. We got a big day, boys. Couple things. Everything's lining up for us, it seems. The very first Maple Bitcoin live stream, we got the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve announced. So welcome, Jor, Forrest, Rajat. We're going to skip the intros. Let's get to her, boys. What's the thoughts today? Who wants to kick it off?
The big news here, right, is the executive order for the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and a digital asset stockpile, which is nicely separated. I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, I mean, you guys have probably looked at David Sacks's tweet initially, and then there's actually a White House press of the exact details. Yeah, I thought they actually kind of made it pretty good. I thought they did a good job, actually.
Oh, sorry, Rajat.
Yeah, no worries. I got a.
I thought you had something to share there. I just brought it up.
Oh, no worries. No worries. I did have something.
Just a calendar.
I shared the wrong calendar. Oh, there you go. I shared the wrong link, but I was just going to share the tweet that Forrest was referring to. I just had it open. So.
Yeah, nice. So the reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin owned by the federal government. So this is the seized Bitcoin, basically, from the Silk Road and Bitfinex. I actually also saw within there, I think within this tweet, or maybe another tweet by David Sacks, that he did mention that the Bitcoin that is supposed to go back to victims of like the Bitfinex will go back there. So it's not the total 200,000 that people are saying that they have unaudited 200,000. So to me, it sounds like it's more likely going to be like 80 to 120,000 that initially goes into the reserve. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that regardless, I think they're going to accumulate more. If they go with what Senator Lummis was saying, I think they want 1 million in total or more. So if that works out, it goes crazy.
Oh yeah, it goes bonkers. I think the wording that I found very interesting with this reserve is that if there's an ability to not affect the taxpayers to accumulate more Bitcoin, then they'll seek those options out. And we understand who's in charge of that, which is the Treasury Secretary and the Secretary of Commerce, who are both Bitcoiners, full on Bitcoiners. So they're going to look at other assets they have, which they could literally swap and like sell and buy Bitcoin, and think that's a better investment, which it entirely is. So there's a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of terrible takes on this. There's some decent takes out there too. There's a lot of people saying like, oh, they're not buying Bitcoin immediately on an executive order, and so they're not going to. And it's like, I don't know, that wording sounds like they're going to in the future.
I think it's important to consider that they're just not selling their Bitcoin, right? There was always that shadow above people who wanted to buy Bitcoin. They were thinking, no, we're not going to buy. We're going to buy when the US government sells all its Bitcoin and the price comes lower. But that's not going to happen anymore. And I think that's bullish on its own.
I think so too. It's like literally those coins have been taken out of circulation. Yeah, administrations change. It's an executive order, so it's not written into like full on law yet. There's a little bit of nuance there, but I think you're right. Like as of now, those coins have been taken off of the market, and it's like a potential. Those could have been sold at any point. Like prior to Trump getting in, there was talks about them having to sell them. Like they got approval from some court or something to sell them, and everyone was losing their minds. And it's like, that would add a lot of selling pressure to Bitcoin for sure.
Yeah.
Big time. And I think to me, it seems like the perfect timing with everything right now with the Fort Knox stuff with the gold. That would be a very budget neutral way of getting some more Bitcoin without the taxpayer's expense. The other thing that I found interesting is that they have kind of gone out of their way to show the previous administration, they sold the Bitcoin. And they're pretty specific in terms of how much they missed out on with that, which was $17 billion. Yeah. So when you're trying to, as Bitcoiners here, obviously we understand what's going on a little bit. But for the average person, when they see this stuff, they're like, why is the government buying Bitcoin with our tax dollars? And so I think that when you can come at them like this and say, well, hey, now we're not spending any of your tax dollars. Everything's going to be done with, either selling other things or, saving costs other ways. But also, like, this is why we're doing it, because the last people who were here sold it and we lost $17 billion worth of Bitcoin because of that, or of proceeds from that.
Yeah. The government also has some ability to mine Bitcoin, I feel like, as well. Like there's state sponsored energy projects, or they have some, connection to some energy projects. Like in Canada, I know a little bit more specifically about that. Like I think the Liberal government basically funded one of the pipelines, right, which is, a source of energy, not electricity, but a source of energy, right? So I mean, I don't know what the Hoover Dam is, if it's connected to the government or something like that, but some hydro projects, I'm sure they have their feet into, and there's a lot of excess electricity stored in those dams and whatever other energy projects that they're involved in. They could throw a Bitcoin miner on there. They could start the hash wars, right? They could start participating as a nation state in Bitcoin mining. I see that as a potential in the future too, which, wouldn't cost taxpayers anything really. Like there's the initial startup cost, but they could offset that. They could offset that by selling something else, or, even like the stuff that Doge is doing, right? That's all taking, that's taking that money back from the taxpayers. So then they're kind of like, if they're doing that, then they could see that as like a surplus, and that could even go into Bitcoin. There's a lot of potential for them to buy Bitcoin.
I think the other thing that was important in David's tweet was that they're going to be having a strategic asset, a digital asset stockpile. What was it? Yeah, a digital asset stockpile, and they're not going to be buying any more. So I think that really kills off a lot of the altcoins.
I think so too. But if you look at, I searched up XRP on Twitter after that was announced, and the delusion. I mean, they're like, there was these tweets of people saying, "Oh, Bitcoin and XRP in a strategic U.S. reserve," and it's like, did you guys didn't read this? Like, they're so delusional with everything. So of course they're going to be delusional with this as well. Like the delusion is a part of being a part of that community, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, it's very clear. Like there's literally going to be like active management with the digital asset stockpile, and they're going to sell when they see fit, and they're not able to buy back with the way that it's written now. And then what do they do with the proceeds from that? That's a surplus as well, right? That costs the taxpayer nothing.
I think what some of the Ripple guys think is that, the escrow that Ripple has set aside, they think that that's going into the strategic reserve. They think that Ripple is going to give it away for free.
What?
It's so crazy. I actually saw a few tweets on that. So I thought that was absolutely insane.
That's wild.
Do you guys have any theories of why, like, Trump not tweeted, but posted about XRP, Cardano, and what was the other one? Ethereum, I think. Do you guys have any theories in terms of like why? And also, a few of those guys are going to be at the White House tonight for the crypto summit. It seems pretty clear that they're not going to be adding any of these assets to the stockpile. What's your guys' theories on that?
I think it was a bone he had to throw to people that funded his presidency, and it pumped their bags. Like I think ADA or Cardano or whatever went up like 30% on that tweet, because it's like so obvious how worthless it is, and so it's only driven by hype. So yeah, I think it was just a bone thrown to these. It's like a little pump given, and same with the stockpile, right? It's like, we acknowledge you guys. You're not the same as Bitcoin, but we have considered you because you've given us so much money.
Somebody said make some of his allies a quick buck. Keep in mind that Trump is also running his own crypto fund.
Yeah, Liberty Financial.
You don't know if they're buying all these coins and then dumping them as soon as they jump, right? I mean, they could easily manipulate the system in that way.
Good point.
Just I know we kind of came in hot here. Zero intros for the channel at all, which I love. But I just want to say hi to everybody in the chat. We can all see the comments here. The one thing, we're going to leave some time at the end of the show. This is going to be a shorter show than usual. We got some things that we got to get done today, each of us. So what I'd say is, if you do have any specific questions for us to address at the end of it, we're going to save about 10 or 15, maybe more minutes at the end. just put your questions in caps, and I'm going to star them all. I can do that from the software here. The other thing too is we got, I can't even do it. It's not right here, but we got a QR code on the screen there. We got,
There it is.
this is our brand new Koinos wallet. So we got a Maple Bitcoin at koinos.io. And so if you're, enjoying it, if you get any value from us, you can send a couple sats that way. And I'm going to have it up on the screen here. So Zap stream is also live. I see that Letha zapped us 1,000 sats. So thank you, Letha. And just wanted to say hi to everybody there. So let's keep this rolling, boys.
The other thing, sorry to interrupt there, Jor. The other thing I'll mention is we're all streaming it to our own individual channels, but eventually we're going to be just moving this over to Maple Bitcoin. So if you're not over and subscribed to the Maple Bitcoin channel, it's a good opportunity to do that ahead of time before we transition over to there fully.
Good call.
Yeah, it's. I think it's important that we do these live sessions so that we can update things regularly. We can update our audiences just on everything. So make sure that you subscribe to the other channel, the Maple Bitcoin channel. We're all going to be part of it. I've been posting a lot of the videos from Maple Bitcoin to my own channel, and I won't be doing that anymore. I don't think any of us will be doing that anymore. So subscribe to the other channel. There's going to be more content. The content is going to be great. I think we work really well together. We're getting a lot of ideas, a lot of great ideas out, and it saves your mind, to be honest. It makes it so that you don't constantly think about what could be happening. You're not constantly anxious. That's our goal. We're just trying to get out as much great information as possible.
Yeah. So we covered a lot of the strategic reserve there. I wanted to ask you guys a question, want to get your opinions on it about it. Do you think that this is the starting gun for game theory for nation state adoption?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think the US, because the US has the biggest economy, it's just going to make it less weird for other countries to adopt. What are your thoughts on that? I think they're just putting the first step forward, and it's going to keep going.
Yeah, I think that's true too. I think it'll be maybe a tiptoe situation as well, because I think this is like I think this is the starting gun, but people are like not sure still if the race is going on. I think that if this was passed through Congress, written into law, maybe if there was active buying going on, this will be like, okay, the starting gun already went off and we didn't start running yet. So I think nation states seem to be pretty slow to react to stuff. So, but I do think also on top of that, and maybe beside my point, I think that there are nations that have already started. They just are keeping it quiet because that's advantageous to do so.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about like how this thing possibly could play out, and I think if you've been in Bitcoin for a little while, kind of the number that's been floating around in terms of like available Bitcoin, we know how many Bitcoin are going to exist. We know how many Bitcoin have been mined already, but the number that's kind of been floating around for the last couple of years to me has been about 2 million Bitcoin, like available on exchanges. I know that a lot of these countries and public companies buy over the counter, but if you just really take a hard look at like objectively how much Bitcoin's available versus how much each of these countries is going to want to accumulate, it's going to go pretty quick. And that's just countries alone. Then you think about the states, then you think about the pension funds, the BlackRocks of the world. Like it doesn't really seem to, I just don't think there's enough Bitcoin. And when people realize that, when other countries realize that, I think absolutely they're going to just do anything that they can at that point to get into this thing. And I just don't think there's enough Bitcoin for everybody. Do you guys think that anybody is going to have more than 500? I know it's a pipe dream of the US to get 1 million Bitcoin per the Lummis bill, but do you guys think anybody's going to actually exceed MicroStrategy's 500,000 Bitcoin here? And on top of that, do you think that there's any relationship with Strategy and the strategic Bitcoin reserve in the US?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to be honest. I think they're going to run out of cash. I think they're going to run out of sellers who want dollars in exchange for Bitcoin. Who knows how long that'll happen? How long that'll take. Maybe I'm completely wrong here. Maybe there are a lot more people who don't actually understand Bitcoin than I think. But I think eventually they're going to run out. I think people are going to figure out what Bitcoin is before the US can get to 1 million.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that they could get to a lot. I think there is a lot of Bitcoin out there at different prices. I think a lot of people are willing to part with their Bitcoin. So I kind of differ in my opinion there from Rajat. But Do I think that they're going to outpace strategy? I'm not sure, because strategy is actively accumulating already, and it has such a head start with 500,000 coins. So I think as Bitcoin's price goes up, strategy's ability to acquire Bitcoin actually increases as well. Their strategies, like the premium on strategy goes up, and then their strategies to accumulate Bitcoin become even more efficient, even with the price goes up. That's why people are always upset about, oh, why didn't Sailor smash buy when the price went down? It's because that's not the way their strategy is able to function. Like the MNAV has gone down too much, right? Because they're a levered play of Bitcoin. So as the price of Bitcoin goes up, they're able to buy more Bitcoin, which is counterintuitive, but it's if the US starts buying Bitcoin, if all these other nation states, I mean, maybe I agree a little bit with Rajat actually when I think about not just the US and strategy being the big buyers, but then also other nation states. Like if everyone starts buying Bitcoin and starts to realize it, then yeah, maybe they won't be able to get to 1 million, because those coins, we have a max supply, and enough. I mean, nations have so much money, so like they could start running out of sellers. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have this. Somebody actually mentioned it on the chat. I have this quote where I say Bitcoin will run out at every price, because the people who own Bitcoin, eventually they become longer and longer term holders, right? Let's say you have people who bought at 10 cents, they're willing to sell at $100,000. Maybe some of them were willing to sell if Bitcoin's price goes back down to 70, 60, $50,000. But eventually those people are going to run out, because Bitcoin is finite. The number of Bitcoin that people have is finite. If you don't have Bitcoin, you can't sell it. That it's as simple as that. Like Germany, they brought the price down significantly when they sold at 50K, but how are they going to sell 50,000 Bitcoin again if they don't have 50,000 Bitcoin to begin with?
Yeah, you can't make more of it. You can't counterfeit it. There's only one way to get it. Yeah, this is crazy, guys. Like I think people are understating how big of a deal this is actually.
I couldn't.
And it's inevitable.
More. Yeah.
And I do think it's a little bit unfortunate in a way, because it seems like it's inevitable. And we all foresaw Bitcoin going to 1 million. It's going to happen. We all know that's going to happen, but this is an accelerant to that. And to me, that's sad to a degree, because it means that my work has become worth a little bit less, and will continue to that'll continue to happen, and it'll happen faster because of things like this, which just means I can acquire less Bitcoin now and into the future, as this will inevitably create number go up.
Yeah, you'll be working for less, but your net worth will go up. So you'll have to spend less to get whatever you need. That's the beauty of this whole thing. Whether you're talking individuals, countries, business owners, like the nice thing about this is, like as Rajat kind of mentioned, there is like the more time people spend in Bitcoin, the more conviction they have, and the longer they're going to hold on to those Bitcoin. And so pretty much what that means is, like, the longer you hold on to those Bitcoin, the less of it you're actually going to have to spend when you need to spend it on something. Right. So it's kind of like I call it a win-win in Bitcoin, but it's the absolute truth, because when the price dips, whatever you do for the world, whatever kind of value you add to the world, you're getting more sats for that, which is what you want, the real money. Right. And when the price goes up, your net worth is up, and whatever you need to spend on actually gets cheaper. So there's really no way to lose here in Bitcoin, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I actually just thought of something. Sorry, I just thought of something. So if somebody has $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, they're actually further ahead of somebody who has, let's say, $1 billion of real estate, because that person with $1 billion of real estate, they can exercise that liquidity. They can get that liquidity out of it pretty much immediately. And I mean, for a fact that there's going to be buyers, right? Because with real estate, the way that I see it, it's completely just a manipulated market, right? So the billionaires, like back to what you were saying, Jor, if you have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and you sell a chunk of it every month, you're never going to get through it. You're literally never going to get through it. If you sell it slowly, there's always going to be buyers, and that billion is going to become 5 billion, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, 50 billion. It's going to keep increasing, right? So you'll literally never run out of money.
I think the cool thing about that too, and I forget, I think it was on another show I was on recently, but we were talking about that with real estate and Bitcoin. And I think that's such an underappreciated part of Bitcoin, is that you can sell it at any time. You can take, if you want to, you can take profits on it. And so somebody's like, the reason why Bitcoin's better is because you can't just sell like a part of your house when the value goes up, right? You got to sell the whole, it's all or nothing. I said like you could kind of refinance it if you wanted to. That's kind of one like roundabout way to do that. But that takes time. You can't do that in one day or like on a Sunday afternoon. So like the liquidity within Bitcoin is definitely the most slept on aspect of it. I think that not a whole lot of people, there's people who think that they can't sell their Bitcoin. I'm like, it's the most liquid asset that exists.
Yeah. And I think those financing options will be coming to Bitcoin as well. So we'll see that, which I think will be like a temporary arbitrage play between fiat and like hyper Bitcoinization. Like I think there'll be a time where you can borrow against your Bitcoin for dollars and spend those dollars, but eventually that time's going to run out as well. I think that's like there's like a slim in between time frame where you could finance your lifestyle off of just holding Bitcoin, not even spending it.
Yeah. I think you have to hold for 4 years though. Like if you wanted to, let's say for example, if you bought a certain amount of Bitcoin, you have to hold it for 4 years to make sure that you don't run out.
Interesting. Yeah.
On the real estate versus Bitcoin, I like this topic. Rajat, you spend a lot of time talking about real estate. Do you guys, I had a hard time with this myself, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but do you guys see any reason why somebody would actually buy real estate? Like not a house. Well, I'm talking like non-utility assets here. Obviously you want to live in a house, right? That's what everybody wants. But in terms of like a rental house or an Airbnb, is there any sort of reason why an investor, a baby boomer, anybody with some excess cash, which we usually used to put into real estate, is there any reason why somebody would buy real estate instead of Bitcoin? Like, is there any sort of pros and aspects of real estate that Bitcoin doesn't have? I struggle with this one.
There's a couple things. So if somebody was very heavily allocated to Bitcoin already, you could see the value of buying a rental property as diversification. That's one thing. So that's coming from a different side, right? Somebody that's already a big Bitcoin holder. The other thing too is real estate is unique. So there's the appeal, just kind of like how people buy art and collectibles and cars. So if you're really into real estate, you could buy a really cool piece of property, thinking that you could flip it later because of how unique and cool the house or property is. Those are literally the only two good reasons. And I'm being very generous with those reasons because there's a lot of bad reasons to buy real estate instead of Bitcoin.
I think there's the cash flow. There's the tax benefits, of course. But again, those tax benefits may not exist anymore if we go to a Bitcoin standard. So that's probably not going to be the case. I can actually see a reason to buy Bitcoin to maybe do an Airbnb or something. Because with Airbnb, let's say, for example, you find this unique property somewhere, you get it on sale, you get it at a massive discount. It's going to be like a business. It's like you're buying a business. You're not buying a savings tool. You're buying a business, which the business is going to depreciate over time. There's going to be amortization. You're going to get the tax benefits of the Bitcoin, or sorry, of the building depreciating over time. So you get that benefit, but I think you'd still be better off owning Bitcoin, because if you own a significant amount of Bitcoin, you'll probably make a lot more money. But then again, I've seen Airbnbs that are probably worth $500,000 making like $10,000 a month.
Really?
So $10,000 a month is 2% a year, or 2% a month, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty significant. Like if you can get a $500,000 condo in downtown Toronto, you could probably rent it out for $300 a night if it's really well kept. But there are all those costs involved, so maybe you won't get that 10K. Maybe you'll get like 6K. But I mean, that's a pretty decent business. You can put all of that cash flow into Bitcoin. You can put all of it into another Airbnb rental property. But again, I don't think I'd personally want that headache. To each their own. I guess different people think differently. If you just want something to do, maybe you'd want to buy that rental property. But in reality, it doesn't really make any sense. The total returns from Bitcoin are going to be much higher.
I think another thing I just thought of, a benefit of real estate is the ease of leverage. So you can buy real estate and get a very large mortgage on it. So, Rajat, you were talking about, a $500,000 Airbnb, but if you put 10 or 20% down on that, and then you're making 10 grand a month, like that's that's really good, right? I mean, yes, it is a business. It's not an investment. I think that's a real differentiator that people should consider when they're looking at real estate, that it is a business, not an investment, for the most part. Especially rentals or Airbnb, right? There's, you got to hire cleaners, you got to pay fees to Airbnb, you got to make sure that everything doesn't break. And that's a lot of work. Not something I'd be willing to do. And, if you could get the same leverage on Bitcoin, you would drastically outperform. You'd probably outperform without that leverage. But imagine, like 20% down is a 5 times leverage asset buy. So like, if you're 5 times leverage to Bitcoin, that's crazy, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that leverage, the risk added by leverage is a massive thing that people usually seem to forget. But great point there. Yeah.
I think that the other part of this too is with real estate, we're kind of in a position now where most banks, if you go into a bank and say, here, I have a piece of land or a building or whatever, they're much more likely to give you more, leverage, more loan, more lending with the land versus Bitcoin, right? If you went in there today. But I don't think that that's going to be the case in 5 years from now, because Bitcoin itself is a much better form of collateral. Because if you think about walking into a bank and you go in there and you say, okay, well, I have this asset, I want to take a loan against that. That could be land, that could be real estate, that could be Bitcoin. And the bank's thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to give this guy some money to buy it, but I want to make sure that I get my money back, right? And so if the market's turned or something happened, I lost my job and I stopped making my payments on that loan, the bank's going to have a much harder time selling that piece of land or property. It's going to take weeks, months, even years. You got to find local buyers with that, right? Whereas with Bitcoin, if I stop making my loan payments, they just sell some Bitcoin that minute pretty much. So I think it's going to be the preferred form of collateral in the future. We're obviously not there yet. And I think that Bitcoiners are going to get a much better rate on their loans versus something like real estate. So yes, I agree, but I think it's going to change.
Yeah. It's a much better form of collateral. And if you look at, the 2008 financial crisis that was largely mortgage driven, a lot of banks just let people live in those homes without paying the mortgages because they knew they couldn't find a buyer for that house anyway, like at any price, basically. These houses were selling at fire sales, and the amount of cost to evict these people out of their homes wasn't worth the effort that it would be to actually acquire that property back. So there was tons of people living in these homes they couldn't afford, and they literally weren't paying the mortgage for them. And with Bitcoin, if you had a Bitcoin backed loan like that, they could take that Bitcoin, and even if it was a bear market or something was going on like that, they could still sell it for something immediately, right? Whereas that's not the case with property. And the whole time you're paying property taxes and other fees, the whole time you're trying to sell it. It could take months and months and months if there's a super illiquid, or years even, if there's a very illiquid housing market within that area.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go into the questions. By the way, we have a lot of them. We have 11 questions. I think I want to get through all of them. I want to make sure that nothing gets left unanswered.
Okay, I got a couple though before we go though. First thing is that we've been receiving a couple sats here from people. We got our very first contribution to the Maple Bitcoin Koinos Fund, 2,000 sats, and then 5,888 sats.
Beautiful.
So thank you. That's Forrest. You want to show how to do that again?
Oh, sure.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right here.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm mirrored. Yeah. So if anybody has a Lightning wallet and wants to donate, they can send sats to this QR code. They can scan this, and that goes towards the group Lambo fund. We're all going to share one Lambo.
At least we're
in different provinces.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one. So we did a post on the channel, and we'll probably do this hopefully every week, where we have a couple of questions that build up through the week. You can just go into the posts here and do it on our channel. But the first one here is from Andrew Walker. And he said, I would like to hear your collective opinions about self-custody, best options. So we don't have a whole lot of time to do this, but like right off the top of your head, what do you guys think of like the average Bitcoiner out there, how they should be keeping their Bitcoin safe?
Self-custody, definitely self-custody. I feel like keeping your Bitcoin private keys to yourself, keeping your seed phrase, it's not that hard. It's only 12 or 24 words. Either you can write it down, you can put it in metal, you can memorize it, you can use a collaborative custody service. However you do it is up to you, but I think self-custody is definitely the way to go. Because if you go through a custodian, they may not even have your Bitcoin in the first place, right? It's like what happened with FTX. The people who removed their Bitcoin from FTX in October of 2022, they still had their Bitcoin, while the people who waited lost everything, or they lost something like 80% of the value of their Bitcoin. So self-custody is definitely the key.
Yeah, and I would add to that that you want to start working on figuring out what that means. Don't hastily get into self custody, but there should be a little bit of a warm fire underneath your feet to start learning how to do that, getting your coins off of an exchange if they're on there, and learning the best custody solution for yourself. And there's trade-offs to all of them. Some of the trade-offs are just simplicity to a more complex solution. But some place to start would be getting yourself a decent Bitcoin only hardware wallet, and figuring out a seed phrase situation. And then you can go way more advanced, multi-sig, collaborative custody, encryption. You could go down all of those different routes as you learn about it, but taking self-custody would be a really good first step to learn how to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the thresholds that I usually use is like, if you got 1 million sats, you should consider taking it off the exchange. Get it into any sort of wallet that you can actually hold the keys to. That could be an Aqua wallet on your phone, anything, a software wallet like Sparrow, but get it off the exchanges. Once you get to 1 million sats, make your first UTXO, get it off there. After 10 million sats, I do think that that's when people should start looking into like a device, like you guys mentioned there, like a cold card, a Jade, a passport, something that's air gapped, something that doesn't connect to your computer. And then kind of my rule from there is like, once you get 50 million sats or half a Bitcoin, you should be looking into multi-sig. I just think that multi-sig is the best option to kind of take some pressure off of you. You eliminate that single point of failure on yourself. It is a little bit more challenging. This whole thing, as these guys mentioned, should be kind of taken in stride and slowly. But that, I think, is something that everybody should be working towards, is getting into a 2 of 3 multi-sig kind of at the minimum, if you have half a Bitcoin or more. So
yeah,
agreed.
Let's get to a couple of these questions here, boys. First of all, shout out to Vake for super chat, our very first super chat here. I don't know who gets it or where it goes to. I don't think we're even monetized yet. So thank you
one
for
of
that.
Our channels. Appreciate that, Vake. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is a good question from Osnell. Bitcoin question, guys. How high can the difficulty adjustment can go up? In case a supercomputer started mining, is there any difficulty adjustment cap? Do you guys know the answer to this?
That is a great question. I would assume there is no cap, but that's an assumption. I actually don't technically know that the answer to that question. That's something I need to look into. But I believe, why would there be a cap, right? The difficulty is adding more numbers to the front of the hash, right? So they could infinitely do that theoretically.
Yeah, I'd say that there should be no cap. I don't know for sure. Yeah. But I don't see why there would be a cap. This is supposed to be something that is, we're supposed to have at least until the Bitcoin mining should be happening until at least 2140. So in that time, I think the difficulty will be orders of magnitude higher than where it is today. So I don't see a reason for a cap. Just because technology keeps improving, it's going to keep improving forever. We're going to see that the amount of people who are mining Bitcoin are going to increase forever, and the difficulty will have to keep increasing. So logically, I don't think that there would be, but I don't know if somebody can put that in the chat. Maybe we can get that answer.
I can't see there being a cap, because even if you look at like the hash rate for the last 16 years, like the first 4 or 5 years of it, it was pretty much flat compared to what it is today. And I think that when we zoom out like 20, 30 years from now, I think this point is going to look very flat as well. I just think that this whole thing between like the demand for it, the hash power, everything, the mining, I think we're just like, the game hasn't even started yet. So I don't think that there's going to be a cap anywhere near where we are today. This thing's built to last for hundreds and thousands of years here. We're 16 years into this thing. So if there is a cap, I think it's orders of magnitude higher than we're at right now.
Yeah.
Next question here from Minga. Do you guys think the gold is in Fort Knox? This is a good question.
We answered this already in another video that we recorded. What did we even say? I think it's likely there's a large part of it now. I just saw a tweet that said it would take like a team of auditors like years to actually audit the gold
Really?
because there's so much there, and the process of auditing gold and actually seeing, making sure that it is authentic takes time. So I don't know, man. Like I within that time they could acquire that gold, right? I mean, they have the money printer. They could print money and buy gold if they had to make sure they don't fail this audit if it's that big of a deal to them.
Yeah, I'd assume it's there. I don't know. I don't see a reason to think why it wouldn't be. They could be scammers, but either way, if it's not there, then Bitcoin's going up. If it's there, Bitcoin's still going up because they might use that gold to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's kind of my theory on it right now. I just think that there's too many things happening right now. There's too many coincidences, right? Like if you think about Elon and Trump talking about Fort Knox, like questioning it, and then you see all this gold that's coming over from London and they're running out, they're increasing their, guaranteed deliveries from like a day to like 6 months. Like I think a lot of that gold's coming over here to the US. So when they open up the doors of Fort Knox, it's going to be there. And then I think they're going to start selling a lot of that for Bitcoin because that would be a budget neutral way of accumulating more Bitcoin.
Especially if they can sell IOUs to that gold.
Right. Yeah, sell the paper Bitcoin, keep some real stuff, and buy some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Daz Wagatron. What happens if China does a $1 trillion smash buy?
Oh, man. I honestly don't think that they could.
No.
I don't think that would work, but the price would probably go to like $1 million.
No, it would just more than that, wouldn't it be? Like,
you think so? More?
I don't know.
Because it would just hit every limit sell up the way, and there isn't that. I mean, I think a lot of people create a limit sell closer to when they're wanting to exit. They don't just have like, oh, I just have a limit sell for this Bitcoin that I hold on an exchange for like $1 million in fiat.
Yeah.
Like they don't just have that set. Like I think people set limit sells when they're closer to getting ready to get rid of it, or they just market sell. So it would skyrocket. It would skyrocket. Like it would literally just like, you would see this violent upheaval of green candle, and then it would begin to equalize. But $1 trillion into Bitcoin that's half of its current market cap. So, I mean, the market cap would just go astronomical.
Insane,
they would not be able to. They would not get very much Bitcoin. If anybody is smash buying huge amounts, they should consider maybe not doing that.
Yeah, unless it's the U.S. government because they have unlimited U.S. dollars.
Yeah, but even still, it's just an inefficient way of acquiring it because you need to allow sellers to show up. So it's incremental buys would allow that, because although Bitcoin is fairly liquid, and it's 24/7, so it's liquid in that way, but it's illiquid in the way of having enough sellers at every single price point, right? It's not a fully liquid market in that way.
Actually, I was thinking of something. So if the U.S. government does do something like this, they can print dollars or they can borrow dollars. They could actually use that as part of the game theory, where they continue to print more dollars until the Bitcoin runs out and nobody else can afford the same amount of Bitcoin. Like, let's say, for example, they do that smash buy of $1 trillion. Bitcoin's price goes to $5 million a coin. And then they just have a perpetual bid for $5 million a coin. Because to them, it's free.
Right.
Right? To them, it costs nothing. So they can keep buying more and more and more until the US dollar is worthless. And then at that point, let's say all of these other countries, let's say like El Salvador, for example, if the price of Bitcoin was at $5 million today, would they be able to buy a coin a day? Probably not.
Probably
and they're just going to eliminate, again, it's game theory. They're going to eliminate so many of their ops, as we might say. They're going to eliminate so many of their potential competitors in this space, and they can just continue. Again, this is just complete speculation, of course. I don't know if they're going to do this. I don't know if they have the ability to do this, but it will destroy the value of the dollar. That's one of the negatives.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and it would cause rampant inflation as well, because the money would be debased until people switched over to a harder currency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that printing US dollars doesn't affect the taxpayer in a way. I mean, it does because it's a stealth tax and, through inflation and debasement, but it doesn't directly affect them. So it could be another way that they buy Bitcoin. I mean, I think it would be wildly unpopular, but technically with the EO,
That's what I was going to say.
do it.
Yeah, I think that the U.S. government right now is already walking a very fine line in terms of balancing this, like trying to accumulate some, buy more without like a really negative blowback from the citizens, which is good. I mean, that's what governments should be doing. They should be worried about what their citizens think instead of the other way around. Okay, so let's. I don't think that that's possible. That's my answer, but yeah, it could happen. It'd be wild if it did. This is a good question here from Mert. How could one person or organization create such a complex, wonderful, and yet simple money and network in 2008? All of this must have been planned. I'm curious about your views. So we know in 2008, that's when the financial crisis was. And if you look at the very first Bitcoin block, the Genesis block in 2009, January 3rd, 2009, it had something about the collapse of 2008. So it does seem to me like it was kind of, planned this way. You look at the SHA-256 from the NSA, you look at everything that came into this before the Genesis block. I have a hard time believing that this hasn't been planned for a very long time. Who's planning it? I don't know. But to me, I don't see any reason why a bad actor, whether you want to call it, Putin, whoever, I don't see how a bad actor could benefit from Bitcoin. So to me, if we think that it's planned, I think that it was some sort of good people within some sort of organization that just put this out to the world and said, go ahead. What do you guys think?
I mean, if we look at the technology, like Bitcoin is a combination of a bunch of different technologies put together and open sourced. And it didn't work flawlessly from the beginning either. There's been a lot of changes to make sure that it works without bugs and all of this in the early ages of Bitcoin. So I think they there was a lot of planning that went into it, and there was a lot of research based on other people's work that went into it. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any other thoughts beyond that.
Yeah, I think a lot of work went into it. I think there was, of course, some intention there. They probably did want to make sure that there's no more. It's like whatever is inscribed in that first block. What's inscribed on that first block? If you guys remember,
Chancellor on the brink of bailout.
Yeah.
It's London Times or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So of course, I think the goal would have been to make sure that doesn't happen again. Or it doesn't happen on a Bitcoin standard, and it won't. How can it happen? They can't bail out banks by creating more Bitcoin. It's impossible. So I think it was pretty much something planned. I mean, everything seems to have been thought about, but there are changes over time. Of course, there are things that we want to add, we want to change, we want to improve on, and that's going to happen with everything. You can't think of everything. I think that's what makes Bitcoin so great. It's It's programmable money, right? So over time, if there are problems, we can change it. If we need to improve it, if there's quantum computing issues, we can improve it. We can make those changes that we need to.
There's this great speech by Andreas Antonopoulos who says the next Bitcoin is Bitcoin because Bitcoin can be changed if it has to be. And that's totally how I see it.
With proper consensus, right?
Of course, yeah.
Here's a really good question. Hoggendale. Do you think Bitcoin could actually work as a dominant medium of exchange in a far future where nobody will want to part with it, especially as AI and robots produce everything you need for cheap?
I got to think about this one here.
I'll take a stab at it first. I think that what we need to realize right now is like when you think about like buying things with sats or zapping people on Nostr or sending sats to a show like this, like, yeah, it seems like a lot, especially if you play this thing out like 100 years from now and think about how valuable those sats are at that point. But like today, we can still buy and sell them with dollars for, the dollar amount. So I think that the only thing that's going to happen here is, yes, I think that Bitcoin is going to be a store of value without a doubt. But in terms of a medium exchange, I kind of see this going two different ways. I think that there's going to be a lot of people who kind of go down this fiat path, like kind of the existing system that we have for a very long time until it pretty much, they don't have a choice but to come over here. Meanwhile, Bitcoiners who have the sats, have the purchasing power right now, will continue to buy and sell and transact with each other using those sats. So I think that there's going to be kind of a split here in the world. It's already happening. Like we're kind of part of it right now. And I think that, you know, the ability to transact privately to anybody else in the world is a pretty big idea and a pretty big deal. So those who are in that world, I think, will continue to buy and sell as a medium exchange using Bitcoin, while countries, banks, and these public companies use it as a store of value. As long as the sats are flying between each other, that's good. That's staying with the individual. It's not being sold to the exchanges for fiat, where that goes into the BlackRocks and the countries and stuff like that. So I do think that it will. I don't know what it looks like in 100 years. It's impossible to tell, but that's kind of like the short term, my take on it.
I think it's going to take a while for Bitcoin to be used as a medium of exchange. There's a lot of people that say, oh, Bitcoin's failed because you can't use it as a medium of exchange. Everyone wants to hoard it. I think that's just where we're at right now, as we're building it as a store of value. I think how it eventually looks, and I don't know when this happens, but there will be more people not accepting fiat because they don't want it. They would trade it for Bitcoin anyway, and that's what they probably used to do, but they only accept Bitcoin. So I think medium of exchange happens when people demand Bitcoin as payment. I don't think it's going to be so much voluntary. And then it's like, you have no other choice, right? Like you have no choice but to spend your Bitcoin because that's all you have. And that's what other people want anyway.
I think there's always going to be services that we're going to need humans for. Robots can only do a certain amount of things. We probably still need to, let's say, for example, if we want to go on vacations, we're probably still going to need people to do a lot of the things that we go on vacation for, right? A bartender, you're probably not going to want a robot bartender. There's probably going to be other things that, I mean, there are things, of course, that you need that you're going to have robots for. But let's say, for example, doctors, nurses, healthcare workers are definitely going to have to be, at least part of them are going to have to be humans. I don't think I don't think robots will work for that. Also, I think the other thing, the other way to look at this is people won't want to give away their Bitcoin until the return on it drops below a certain level. So at some point when the world is on a Bitcoin standard, it's not like it's going to keep growing at 50% per year. The only reason why it's getting a 50% return per year is that it's still being adopted. 99% of the world has none. We need to get those people to accumulate Bitcoin before it can be that medium of exchange that's accepted globally. But the people who've held Bitcoin for a while, they're already seeing the medium of exchange phase. They're already in it.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say too, is like, if you're holding Bitcoin right now, just imagine a world where there's AI agents hiring AI agents, and they're doing all the work that we don't want to do anymore. And those AI agents are only accepting Bitcoin because they can't go into a bank and verify themselves, their identity. They're only going to have one choice to accept, and that's going to be Bitcoin. So if you have any amount of sats right now, think about the leverage that you're going to have in the future for yourself, for your family, for your business, because you're going to be able to hire all these bots for a very cheap, in your mind, that you got them for, way, whereas everybody else is going to have to get the same amount of sats, but they're going to have to pay a lot more of their dollars for it, or whatever is accepted at that time. So
Yeah.
do you guys got any last words here? This seemed like a really, I mean, we had some really good chats here for sure. There was, the chat was buzzing. I know we got to go here. Rajat's got a prior commitment here in 5 minutes, so I don't want to, mess that up. So I want to say thanks to everybody. Thank you guys for being here. This is the very first episode. They're going to be longer into the future. Obviously, they're going to be about an hour, hour and a half, hopefully every Friday at this time. But you guys got any closing thoughts?
I'll just say, post if you didn't get your question answered, post those on one of the videos, because we'll leave these live streams up, I think, for the most part, on our channels. So yeah, post the questions there. We'll either answer them in the next live stream we do, or individually, or we'll get to them somehow. So yeah, if you feel like your question didn't get answered, that's the move. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming by.
And make sure you subscribe to the other channel. If you're coming here from either Forrest, Jor, or my channel, make sure you subscribe, because we're not going to be doing this live session on our main channels from now on. I think we're going to focus on the Maple Bitcoin channel and only the Maple Bitcoin channel. So make sure you subscribe.
Yeah.
Yes. And somebody was chirping me saying that it's too early for a beer. Is it? I got a workout in this morning. I got my work done. It is beer o'clock here. I even got a Guinness for this special occasion today. So very historic day, boys. It couldn't have worked out better in terms of our very first live stream together. And keep an eye out on the channel. We'll have a couple more videos coming this week, but for sure we'll be here next Friday for a live stream. So thanks everybody. Thanks everybody in the chat. And for the sats, we got 7,889 in our new Maple Bitcoin reserve there. So
Lambo
if
fund.
you want to send a couple on the way out, you can send it to that QR code there, right beside Forrest's head. So thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you guys.